Using AI, we can really start to predict where those issues are going to be and where the safety problems are going to be. Trying to put security in afterwards is incredibly difficult. Once that door is open, it's open. Any company has a major data breach, that's the end of the company. You're never going to get that trust back. A customer doesn't care that there's AI in there if it adds no value at all. It's nothing to them. People were doing 3-month boot camps and coming out and expecting and receiving salaries the year before a senior engineer with 6-7 years experience was getting. There's actually skills that you can outsource that you wouldn't have thought of previously because it would have seemed too much of a risk to the business.
Hi everybody, welcome to the Devico Breakfast Bar. Here we speak with different people involved in the business landscape, share their expertise and delve into the latest tech trends, as well as explore the ins and outs of IT outsourcing. I'm Oleg Sadikov, and today I'm excited to have David Ives, Chief Technology Officer at Restrata. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss new episodes. Hi David, and thanks for joining me today.
Hi Oleg, thanks for the offer.
Now let's start our podcast with a little blitz. I start a sentence and you continue. Career in tech gave me
the opportunity to work with really smart people on really interesting projects.
Career in tech deprived me
probably as much time outside as I would have liked.
My superpower is
enabling others to do the best work possible.
My main weakness is
probably trying to get too involved in the weeds sometimes and having to pull myself out into strategy.
When I'm afraid, I
try to take a walk and clear my head.
That's great. Could you tell us a bit about yourself and your professional background?
Yeah, so I come from quite a strange background. I hadn't gone through the regular sort of CS degree straight from school through university. I worked in retail for over a decade, running a chain of franchises. Completely different industry, but it gave me exposure to people management, and it gave me exposure to working in a business that was fledgling and having to get it up and running and get it to a point where it was sustainable so I could then move on to the next project. So when I kind of look back on it, I realized that it was almost like building up mini startups all the time or mini teams and then getting them to a point where they were self-sufficient. I moved into writing HTML and JavaScript and CSS when I was sort of in my early 30s. Very lucky that I got an entry-level position, allowed me to work with some really, really smart people that taught me a huge amount of skill and sort of leapfrogged my career, moved into sort of much more application development. And then an opportunity came along to do some temporary management of the team, which is where some of my previous skill set kind of started to click with me, where I realized that I could use what I'd gained in over a decade in retail management to start utilizing in technology as well. So I made a switch at that point from development full-time to engineering management, and then on through sort of onto a CTO role eventually. It was kind of brought me full circle, where I was bringing on small teams and I was bringing on products and getting to a point where I was starting something and then getting into market, getting into profitability, and then moving on to the next element.
Working in retail and then becoming CTO at tech industry, those are totally different approaches for me, I would say.
Yeah, it was interesting because I spent a lot of time bringing myself up to a level of technical ability where I could actually earn a living from it. And it was only then that I really found what my passion was. So I threw every ounce of effort I possibly could into it. There was a real epiphany moment for me where I was very realistic with myself that I knew that my technical ability was never going to get me to work in the teams that I really wanted to work in, the kind of companies and the products that I aspired to. And it was at that point when I realized that actually there was an opportunity for me to contribute to those teams in a slightly different way and still be successful. And I realized what I really enjoyed doing was empowering others and developing others. So having that real passion for technology, but also the people management skills and the strategy perspective on things allowed me to combine the two. So I've been very lucky. I've been able to kind of carve out quite a unique role for myself, where the businesses that I've worked for have been looking for somebody to bring business acumen and people management into a product that is highly technical, but maybe some of the technical leaders have been dragged into that side of the business where what they really want to do is stay technical. So we work as a pair or as a trifecta to allow those that want to stay purely technical on that path, I take a slightly different path. And then between us, we're much stronger than we are individually.
Many people have misconceptions about the role of a CTO. According to a 2022 survey by Harvey Nash, 40% of tech leaders feel their roles are misunderstood by their colleagues. What is a misconception people often have about the role of CTO that you would like to dispel?
I think probably the biggest one, what I've seen is that there's an expectation for the CTO to be the most technical person in the business. And I think it's very dependent on the stage of the business. I think at a very, very early seed stage, that CTO role is more either the technical co-founder or the lead engineer, and they are going to be the person that's driving all of the architecture, all of the technical side of the business. As it starts to grow, I don't want to have all the answers. I want to be able to ask the right questions. The team that I build around me are the experts in the field. My role as CTO then is to make sure that the business is considered in all of those decisions. So we're not over-engineering, we're not early optimizing, we're not designing for a scale that we're nowhere near at the moment. We're spending money in the right places. So I have to have a really deep technical background, but I'm not the one that's making all of those decisions. I should be really building that group of people around me. I think it depends on the stage of the business, what kind of CTO you need. I think as you go really, really late stage, they're not involved in the code at all. It's much more strategic at that point. So I think it's on a sliding scale. I think there's still a misconception that there's one shape of CTO that fits all the way through that journey of businesses, which I just don't think really adds value to the business.
Now diving into Restrata's work, can you tell us about your current project you are particularly involved in? What are specific challenges or issues this project aims to address within the safety and security sector?
Currently, there are potentially dozens of different services that our customers would use to provide them with the depth and resolution of information that they really need to be able to ensure that their teams are safe. Restrata's mission is to bring all of those different elements into one single pane of glass. So as a security officer, rather than having to have 10 tabs open on your browser and be jumping between different systems and then trying to make some sort of correlation yourself, we bring those different data feeds and those different elements in together and then not only combine them into something so you can see them in one place, but actually make something that's greater than the sum of its parts. So by bringing in location data and travel data and risk data, not only do you know where a risk is, where people are, and who's traveling, but you can actually start to create a proper view there on who is potentially traveling into an area that might be considered dangerous, and then to give those people the tools to actually do something about that as well and give remedial action. So they can either inform their staff or they can change plans. But we can start to build up these patterns and start to understand. Using AI, we can really start to predict where those issues are going to be and where the safety problems are going to be for individuals and for businesses so that they can plan ahead of time. So when something happens, rather than having to act on it reactively, proactively, the system has already built the opportunity for them to deal with those issues in real time.
Recent report by Cybersecurity Ventures predict that cybersecurity damage will cost the global economy staggering $10.5 trillion annually by 2025. With this growing threat landscape in mind, what steps does Restrata take to stay ahead of cyber threats?
So security is a first-class citizen in everything we build because we've got multiple data feeds and we've got multiple tenants. First thing we have to make sure is that data is only available to the right people. So before we start productizing any data that we have, the first point of call for us on everything is to make sure that that data is secure and it is cleansed and it's coming from a reliable source, and then it is being processed and stored securely as well. Rather than jump into a solution, we'll look at the opportunities that we've got in front of us and we'll do a security assessment on that to make sure that it's a safe option for us to actually bring into the platform before we go any further. A lot of the work that we're doing right now is a continual audit and renew of our authorization and access processes to make sure that we're putting it deeper and deeper into our application. And then the other way to make sure that we are managing any traffic in or out at a very, very high level. So nothing even gets into our system or gets out of our system without us being able to manage that access securely.
What advice would you offer to other organizations considering the adoption of cloud technology to improve their safety and security operations based on Restrata's experience?
I think it is the fact that it's the first point that you have to discuss. One of the biggest challenges with cloud that I've seen is there's a lot of businesses that are using cloud, but they're not really using cloud as a solution. What they're really doing is they're using instances, EC2 instances and S3 buckets. But what they're really doing is exactly the same as what they could do on a server in a rack. It's a very different mindset when you start thinking about how cloud is actually architected and orchestrated. There's so many different moving parts, and those permissions and that level of care needs to be added on every single one of these elements. It's very simple for an engineer or a DevOps team to start adding new AWS services, for instance, without really understanding what happens between the network traffic between these services. Where does that data go? What does that visibility look like? So I think the first thing that I always do is sit down with the architect and we look at this from a risk level around what are we adding before we actually start adding new services in. So it's not trying to put security in afterwards is incredibly difficult. Once that door is open, it's open. It's got to be the first part of the conversation that you make in any new discussion. The problem is you've got a product that's already up and running. You've got a certain level of usability. And the real issue is the businesses are moving so fast. To go to the board and say, I need to take a certain amount of time to actually take my team theoretically backwards and now start working on remedial work is really difficult to get clearance, because what we want to do really is we want to be delivering the next product that is going to generate revenue. It's difficult sometimes for the leadership team and the board to really understand the ROI on security until we've had an issue. Once we've had a breach, everybody understands it and everybody's asking the questions. But if we don't get it done up front, it's very much like that to-do comment that you leave, that you're going to come back and fix this later. Let's be realistic. You don't, something else has happened and you've moved on to it. So if you don't get it done at the beginning, I think, one, it's very difficult technically to start unpicking things and add security in. But two, financially, it's very difficult to get the time and actually get the team focused on something.
Are many companies do this in the beginning?
Probably not enough.
I think probably 10%. No?
It comes down to the stage of the business. It's a little bit like that. If me and my team proposed to the board that it was going to take us 9 months to get this product to market, even as an MVP, because we were going to be worried about scale and orchestration and security and everything else, we'd be laughed out of the room, because what they really want to see is, are we going to get any customer adoption? It's only by having a really receptive board and leadership team that understand the threat to the business if we don't address these things that makes this possible. It's about the way that we communicate it. And a big part of my role is to not try and scare them into understanding what's going on, but is to give real facts and real numbers. As soon as I start talking about the revenue that could be impacted or the threat, let's be honest, any company has a major data breach, that's the end of the company. You're never going to get that trust back. So it's communicating in ways to make sure that it resonates with everybody, that they understand why we're making the investments that we are.
Shifting gears a bit, let's talk about innovation. In your opinion, what's the most exciting development in technology right now that most people are talking about, but should be?
I think AI is the obvious one. It just depends at what level you're talking about it. I think everybody you talk to that's in some stage of fundraising is hearing from every advisor or every potential VC, you've got to have AI in your deck somewhere. Now, whether it's a chatbot for your support team or whether you are actually building an entire product based on LLMs. I think the challenge that we've had is to make sure that we don't knee-jerk into just trying to find somewhere to put AI in so we can put a badge and say that we're using it, is to really think about where does it bring value to our business. The conversations that the CEO, the CPO, and myself are having are around, not what does the product look like in the next couple of months, but what do we look like in 2 or 3 years' time? Because by that point, we would have reimagined the entire platform. The sessions that we're having now is, how do we utilize these tools and these technologies to actually make the lives easier of our customers? Because that's exactly where we want to go. A customer doesn't care that there's AI in there if it adds no value at all. It's nothing to them. So we're trying to really, really pull back from everything that we're doing and saying, well, if we built the product again now with the technologies that are much, much easier to implement, what would we do and what possibilities does that add up? So the plans that we have are really exciting going forwards, of a completely different way of thinking about how we handle resilience. So the tools that we've built at the moment, they're incredibly powerful. and they will become the bedrock of what we do. And the way that those tools are used by our customers actually become the training methods of how we build the product in the future and how we give people something that is completely unique to them and allows them to build their own processes and their own workflows on top of everything else that we do already. So it's something completely bespoke.
How do you foresee the future of cloud computing in the safety and security industry? And what role do you believe it will play in shaping the industry's landscape?
One of the most interesting elements to me is twofold. It's the real-time ability of what we work on and also the cost associated with that as well. We process ridiculous amounts of data. We store a lot of data that we have to manage as well. If we look at something very traditional, the cost of that is exponential. For every customer that we onboard, for every feed that we ingest, our cost increases. Now, we can't continually pass that on to the customer because they're not actually getting any more value from it. So it's rethinking the way that we architect the product itself to use serverless much more effectively as an example that allows us to actually just deal with things as we need to deal with them and then manage that data in a completely different way as well. So relational databases for operational data is fine, but to actually think about how we can use big data based in the cloud to actually manage everything else that we do and then build those cloud services on top of that so we can actually give our customer products that they can utilize. So there's historic data that we can store one way and there's real data, real-time data we can store another way. I think the major change is rather than thinking of a CRUD model or even an MVC model is to think completely differently now about how we utilize different cloud services, potentially from different suppliers, to provide us with the fastest, most cost-effective way of actually processing and delivering data to our customers as and when they need it, rather than having to store things and hope that it's going to be utilized.
Transitioning to discussion on IT outsourcing. With your experience, how do you believe it contributes to enhancing the overall efficiency and effectiveness of business operations, particularly in the realm of technology and risk management?
The vast majority of my team are offshored, some in Eastern Europe and some in Sri Lanka. There's also a couple of engineers that are dotted around random places in the world as well. One of the real elements is obviously cost. It does allow me to manage my costs much more effectively. We are based in London as a business, but if I was to have a completely in-house engineering team, my staffing costs would be probably 6, 7, maybe even 10 times what they are at the moment. I think we've seen a difference in the way that the market has been. But if we look back 2 years ago, the biggest challenge for myself as a technical leader was making sure that I retained the team that I did because the market was so hot. People were being tempted every day by ever increasing salaries. And everybody's got a mortgage to pay. Everybody's got families to look after. So however inviting the culture is that I build within the team and exciting the product is and how forward thinking the company is, somebody being offered 20% extra on their salary is something that's very difficult for them to manage. That's one element. There was a risk there of losing key members of the team constantly. By distributing my team globally, it allows me to spare that risk and share it across different elements a little bit. So I don't have any stream or any squad within engineering that are solely based in one location or via one supplier. There's always some level of contingency and redundancy built in. So the tech leads in each stream are partners with tech leads in another stream. So there's always a little bit of cross-pollination of information and knowledge. So if we do lose a supplier or we lose an individual, we don't lose all of that knowledge straight away. The other thing that's really useful for us being a global business is we have more ability to offer a follow the sun capacity within our team as well. Our earliest waking engineer is in South Korea and our latest waking engineer is in the Dominican Republic. So we've almost got 24/7 cover. Now, while everybody works core hours UK time, it does allow us when we've got a big release or when we've got potential customer concerns that we want to address, or we're trying to get a product to market and we need to maybe stretch those working hours, we can adapt those slightly. So we go from an 8-hour working day to more like an 18-hour working day. There's a little bit of redundancy built in there as well. I think one of the things that I've noticed over the years doing this, though, is the diversity of culture that brings into the team and different ways of working, different opinions and different approaches, that when we are having a technical discovery session, the way that questions are asked, the type of questions that are asked, and the potential solutions that are raised are very different from different people, rather than having more of a hive mind sitting in one office where everyone kind of thinks more around, this is the way we've always done it, this is the way we're going to do it. There's a little bit more bravery and tenacity of experience from very different areas that people can then bring into that conversation, which makes us think slightly differently and gives us the opportunity to put the best solutions out there for our customers.
That's a very interesting case. I recorded more than 50 podcasts and no one mentioned this case before. Great. I totally agree with you. That's really interesting. You mentioned about the hot market 2 years ago. Do you think we can expect something similar in the next couple of years, or that's totally impossible?
The biggest change, I think, is going to be the AI tooling that's available now to help with efficiency within teams. I think if we look back 2 years ago, where there was a crazy amount of VC money that was available, businesses were getting funding for very, very woolly ideas, but the money was there. The main metric that VCs were looking for was growth. Go out and hire as many engineers as you can. People were doing 3-month boot camps and coming out and expecting and receiving salaries the year before a senior engineer with 6-7 years experience was getting. We then got to that point where that market got like that. I think if we look at it now, the variation in interest rates will change. VCs will become much more fluid with their funds again. But the difference, I think, is going to be the change in the market and the change in the industry where those lower level tasks that you would bring a junior in to do can be automated very, very quickly. I think with having that obvious junior market, it's going to be difficult then to justify the mid and the senior and so on salaries. So that's going to be the big change, I think. So when this does all come full circle and we get to a point where there is more money in the market again, it's going to be very different. I think there will be a very hot market, but it'll be for a very specific set of tooling and a very specific set of skills. We're moving away from the doers to the thinkers in a way. The doers, we can manage that, we can automate that, we can get that created for us. It's going to be the people that have got the real in-depth knowledge in things like architecture, cloud computing, really high-level AI. That's where the market's going to be hot. I think there might be quite a gulf there between that and the lower-level skill sets that maybe drop off in demand and become almost seen as sort of redundant at that point. The way things are shifting even now, the usage of something like Copilot has exponentially risen, and it's speeded up teams to a point where do the teams get to the point that they're delivering more, or do the teams get to the point that they need to be smaller? Because there's only so much else the business can actually keep up with. I see teams getting smaller but more concentrated on specific things, and the market for those people will be very, very hot. But I think that mid and junior market will potentially drop off.
I see that not teams become smaller, but teams produce more. Because if you take any pipeline, any backlog of a startup or mid-sized business, they always have so much to do on their plate. And whenever you talk to them, they always say, look, we have so many things, we just limited in resources. It could be human resources, budget resources, doesn't matter. But what I noticed that they started producing more. And to be honest, I don't think that teams will become smaller. I think they will be more efficient and more productive. That's totally my point of view.
Yeah, but I think it's where we saw that rise of 10x your engineering team to deal with that. I think that scale we won't see again. But you're absolutely right. I've never spoken to any team that says we're probably running at 60% capacity because we don't have any work to do. But it's the balance between how much goes in the pipeline and how much budget is available to actually pay for it. That's where I see the difference. You can have 3 really high-skilled people, or you can have 6 mediocre people through the team. And I think that's the change I will see, which is the efficiency part.
Efficiency, yeah. That's the key point. And efficiency comes from money. Expensive money. It's all about that. As the landscape of outsourcing continues to evolve, what trends or developments do you foresee shaping the future of outsourcing in the technology and risk management sectors?
I think it's a little bit similar to my last point, where outsourcing to a degree, what I saw previously was it was used to bulk a team, or your more senior members of your team might be on site or might even be sort of nearshored, but the offshore teams, the outsourced teams were more brought in to bring hands into the job and to get some of the work done. So it was more about a throughput thing. I think what we're seeing now is the skill sets offshore are rising at the same level, if not higher, than they are in the UK sometimes. There's actually skills that you can outsource that you wouldn't have thought of previously because it would have seemed too much of a risk to the business. I think that for the risk element, it's kind of going back to if we've got two main people in the team and they get drawn away by better salaries or a better option somewhere else, that's a big risk to the team. Whereas maybe it's slightly more stable if we outsource it because we can pay significantly greater salaries offshore than we can in the UK. The attitudes that when I was first brought into the concept of outsourcing and offshoring was bring those people in to do your manual testing or your junior or mid-level roles and then promote internally the people that you need. I think the mix is becoming much more blended now. My technical architect is offshore. The majority of my leads are offshore because of the way that the team's structured. And I don't see that as a risk. I would see it more of a risk if I'd put everything in a UK basket. So I think there's a much more of a spread than there used to be now. I think there's definitely areas where certain skill sets are growing very, very rapidly. And there's certain areas in the world where you would go for specific skills. And as your business needs change, you can start to look to a certain area for data or a certain area for architecture. That to me is quite a major change that I'm starting to see now. Is it's kind of localized in that way where you can go for speciality.
Are there specific regions or countries that you find particularly promising for tech talents, and how do you navigate the challenges associated with global talent?
I mean, I'm very lucky that the companies that I work with have got very substantial books of engineers that they work with. So I've already got almost a blueprint of where I can go for certain people. And because of the relationship that I've got with them that's been built up, it allows me to prime some of those teams before I actually need them. So just take data as an example. With some of the strategy that we might have, we know that we're going to have a very, very heavy data requirement coming up in 12 months' time. I can work with those individuals for them to start sourcing and building that team ready for me when I actually need to engage with it. So what that does is it again mitigates the risk of having a just-in-time approach of when I need something to then go out and try and find it. I'm already starting to be able to preload that. And what it does is that's not a job that's on my plate that allows me to deal with other things. And my time is not spent chasing around lots of different areas trying to hire and find people. So the relationships that have been built up are very strong. There's a really good understanding about what we're doing as a business. There's a lot of communication about what our upcoming strategy looks like. So they've already got it in their mind, the kind of people that we're looking for. So they're starting to form those teams in the background ready for me. So I can utilize that as I need to at the right cost.
What advice would you offer to businesses considering outsourcing as a strategic approach to technical development or risk management?
I think it's down to relationship as much as anything else. You know, it's not only the team, but it's the people that you work with the outsourcing company. They need to understand your business. They need to understand what your needs are, how you work, what your expectations are. You need to be incredibly clear. It's one thing hiring one person and making sure that they've got a really clear job description. They know what the objectives are. They know what the business strategy is. But when you're working with an outsourcing company, you've got to amplify that massively. You've got to really make sure that they know how you operate, the kind of skill sets, but also attitudes that you really want in your business and the kind of things that you're looking for. Because as I said, it allows you to kind of build it up ahead of time. I think it's then the key element then is once those people are in the team, once those individuals are part of engineering, that they are part of engineering. They're not contractors. They're not offshore. They are engineers within your team. They're treated exactly the same. They have the same reviews, they have the same performance reports, they have the same objectives, they're invited to the same ceremonies, and they shouldn't feel as if they are a gun for hire. They should feel as if they're part of the team. I mean, we've got people that have been with us for multiple years that enjoy being part of the company. And the only difference for me is when I run through salary with the CFO is they've got a supplier against their name rather than FTE against their name. That is the only difference with the way that they're treated. I don't deal with any of the payment. That goes through the finance team. So when those people are on a call with us, we're all one group. We don't have segregated calls based on where you're sourced from as an individual. So I think it's the relationship with the supplier themselves to build that up to be really, really strong. If people aren't working, you need to swap them out. So you need to be able to have those conversations really quickly. But you need to embrace those people and make sure that they feel as part of the company as anybody else.
David, thanks for joining me today. I don't have any more questions. You mentioned quite a few interesting points, which I will take into consideration and will help in my business. Really, thank you for that. I'm sure this podcast will be useful for my auditory.
Great. Thanks, Oleg. It's been great to meet you.
If you enjoy our discussion and want to stay updated on future episodes, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. That way you will not miss out on the latest insights and conversations from the Devico Breakfast Bar. See you in the next episode.